Penny, are you here? Penny? Okay, colleagues. Okay, colleagues, comrades, we're going to make a start. Can I, first of all, thank you all for taking time out of what I know is a very busy schedule here at Congress to come to what I know will be a fantastic fringe event and an opportunity for all of us to explore some of the great work that's taking place within the ITF right now, coordinating different sections work within the organisation across supply chains. You know, we all know, and we've spoken already, and the theme document's very clear on the sorts of attacks and challenges that we face, and it's also very clear that whilst we're all fighting back in our own way and we're having mixed successes across the globe, of course the reality is that we need to be more coordinated and more focused and more strategic in the way in which we approach our organising and our network and alliance building across not just the affiliates of the ITF, but in a much broader sense within working organisations themselves across the globe. So the ITF in its theme document has identified the 4 levers for power, a do or die issue as far as we're concerned, of course, within the ITF. And in developing our own strategies, we've developed an organisation within the ITF, Scallop, which some of you will be more familiar with than others, and that's the Supply Chain and Logistics Organising Projects team. It's a supply chain team within head office at the ITF, which Ingo fronts up for us and coordinates the activity through. So look, we've got a great panel tonight, all of which I feel don't need an introduction, but when they come to take in their part in the proceedings, we will of course introduce, but we have Sharon Burrows to my right, we have Ingo to my right as well, we have Steve Cotton, of course, the acting, at least for the next couple of days, acting General Secretary of this fantastic organisation, and of course our very own Paddy Crumlin as President of the ITF. So look, I don't want to linger too much on this other than to say we want to hear your own contributions during the course of this fringe. It's really important that you have your say about what's going on in your organisations and link that to the sort of broad work that's going on within the ITF. I should have introduced myself, and I will do now. I'm Steve Turner, for those that don't know me. I'm an Assistant General Secretary at Unite in the United Kingdom, and I'll just chair tonight's fringe. We'll aim to finish the fringe. I know it said 6 till 9. Not quite sure where that printing error came from. It certainly won't be going on until 9 o'clock. In fact, we'll lose a couple of our panellists at around 7 o'clock tonight because we've got other really important business that needs to take place. That doesn't mean that we'll close down the discussion, because we'll still be left with good colleagues that we can have a discussion with, but we will aim to finish tonight's fringe by 7:30. So with your cooperation, keeping your own contributions as tight as we can and to questions as opposed to long speeches, then we'll manage to get everybody in that wants to get in during what will be a very, very interesting fringe. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Ingo and ask Ingo to do a short presentation on the sorts of projects that are running now within Scallop.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And I see a few fans going, so I try to be fast as well and get us as close to the 7:30 deadline as I can. In your tablets, there's a few papers about this event to be found under the logistics conference. Click, you can find it there. And I suggest you either scroll through there tonight or when you can't sleep in your hotel room because you're still jet lagging. When we talk about supply chains and transport workers, we should first look at what supply chains are briefly. They start at the beginning and they end at the end, the start being either a raw material, a manufacturer or the like, and then a good or a commodity is transported in different transport modes to the other end, the retailers and the likes. We call the first part the upstream of a supply chain, and again I refer you to your documents. It's all laid out there in more detail in there. The middle part, where the transport workers are the most involved, the midstream, and the downstream, of course, is where the retailers and ultimately the customers sit. Some of them are what we call producer-driven, some of them are retail-driven, buyer-driven, and all of this is important to understand because we need to know where the money is in these chains. In the olden days, we were dealing with our main employer, an aviation company, a road transport company, a port company, a port terminal operator even. And now, if we look at it this way, this approach changes. So we need to know where in the chain the real money sits, the money that makes the decision, even over our own unions and collective agreements. And in the ITF of the past, we have done the work we have done in a very clear and coherent way. And let's have a look at this in a bigger picture kind of way. The aviation people have supported each other and delivered solidarity as aviation workers to each other. The railway and port workers have done the same. Port workers called upon port workers, dockers upon dockers for solidarity. Same with our maritime operation. Same with the ports at the other end. But it was dockers supporting dockers, seafarers supporting seafarers and dockers. But what the idea of this new approach is that we look at the whole of the ITF, all of transport together. How can we link up with each other more to support ourselves and each other in a situation of crisis? Now, many of you have already heard over the past 3 days, 4 days of other partners in this game outside the ITF, and hence the different colors you see here. These are friends in other global federations such as the ITF, in the warehousing, in the manufacturing and in the retail industry. This is the bigger picture stuff that Steve was just mentioning in his introduction. The ITF has since responded to this and said this is a good approach, the sectoral approach, but we need to go beyond this. And as such, we have introduced a new unit within the ITF, and what looks like an octopus which has light bulbs at its ends is part of that new development within the ITF. Scallop is the supply chain and logistics organizing projects team. So we do nothing but look at that kind of industrial strategic approach, connecting all the different dots, as I think Sharon has mentioned it earlier today in one of our other fringe events. The main idea is to reach beyond the traditional sectors of the ITF, organize along the whole chain. We have used and we will continue to develop new tools, and I will introduce them to you very shortly to deal with that, with those new challenges. And of course, the whole thing is not just something Stephen cooked up together with some friends in London, but the executive board has developed this approach and made it a coherent policy, which ultimately you now find in the Congress theme document. Now let me give you a few examples of how this works. Many of you will remember on the first day we talked about the DHL campaign, one of many examples of our approach as ITF into multinational companies. They are global, They are one of the big four in that industry, as we have in the ports and in other sectors as well. There are other multinationals mentioned in the Congress team document. You have heard of IKEA on the first day. You have read about Amazon in the Congress team document. These are only some examples of that similar approach. But the supply chain thinking goes beyond just dealing with the multinational company. It goes beyond the ITF. I know it's late, but can anybody tell me what this might be? This is the graphic of the different parts and components of an Airbus A380, those big double-decker planes. And in the traditional ITF, we would look at the airline operators, and we would at the maintenance and repair and overhaul people in our sector, in the aviation sector. But since we deal with this new approach, remember the chain. At the beginning is the manufacturing, and only at the end is the airlines in that process. We also engage with the manufacturers of that very plane that ultimately our transport people operate as part of an aviation operation, be an airline, be an airport. In addition to that, we currently develop some work to look at commodities, not just the product, but as a commodity travels. Oil comes out of the ground somewhere, be ashore, be offshore. And again, we had a fringe event earlier today with our offshore, some of our offshore team to discuss that further. And again, then the oil travels. And along that chain, everywhere you look, transport workers move, or, as Stephen has mentioned it in the hubs fringe event earlier today, just in time, just too late. We are the ones in this chain who actually direct this chain and can or cannot make it work. Now all of this, and again, I give you a step aside a little bit to give you a clearer view to this. This is the tools we are using so far, and we have used in recent years and decades. We all know about solidarity letters, we know about action days, we know about picket line visits, and all of this is what we do and what delivers live, hardcore solidarity. This is good stuff. But they get more clever, so we get more clever. We add another layer to our strategy. We engage more and more the people on the ground, not just the general executives, sorry, Steve and Paddy, and presidents of the organizations, but we go down to the shop floor and connect the activists on the ground. We use legal strategies. We have talked about the OECD earlier as a test for the ITF. Others use it a little bit longer already. Shareholders are not very amused when the ITF comes to their beautiful annual general meeting celebrating the successes of the company, and then we confront the shareholders with the naughty side of a company, with the dirty face of DHL and the others. And of course, nowadays, it's not just a press release anymore, it is a whole range of tools we use in the communication strategy. I've mentioned that before, we don't do this alone anymore. We link up, and it is now, thanks to the leadership at the top table, there's a family of global federations who do this in a strategic way, who link up not just on a case-by-case basis, but as a process and a strategic approach to this. All of this underpinned very strongly by research, strategic research, not just give me a few shareholders and tell me who's important in this company, but really looking into customers, the capital structure of the company, etc. Again, have a look at your tablet. You will find education material for this new area of work of the ITF on your tablets. I think we have it, somebody help me, 7 or 8 languages, including Mandarin, including Hindi, including Arabic, Russian, and Japanese. So we move away from the traditional languages, main languages of the ITF. Have a look at this and download what you need. Contact us if you need more. Contact us if you have more ideas for new such fact sheets. We are working, it's a series of 4 at the moment. We are working on another 5 or 6 as we speak. This is a big new thing. This is a big new challenge for the ITF and for its affiliated unions. It questions traditional union structures because as the ITF has its sectors, so have many unions. Some unions have engine manufacturing in their portfolio, and aviation operations. And they need to learn to talk to each other even within their own union, not to mention outside like the ITF does with Industrial. It questions the existing governance within unions. The committees, the sectors of the existing unions, are they still all right? Again, I refer to you to your tablet and the discussion paper on that matter uploaded there. And the same questions are true for the ITF. The sections working together more closely, how do we do this? How do we make this work? The ETF already has a few ideas, the ITF already has a few ideas, but this is fluid and can only be developed further and further with you, not so much by us, as Steve Turner said, by the team in London. This is you coming into this process and developing this process together. This is the challenge ahead of us, nothing smaller than this. Not just the aviation operator, the airline operator anymore, just the airport anymore, but the hub, the airport as a hub. Not just the dockers and the port anymore, but the port as a hub, where all of these people work and all of these people can be organized if we do it right. And I think it was Tony Sheldon in the aviation conference yesterday who said, can you imagine we have control, union control over the 10, 15, 20 biggest airports in the world? Just dream a little. It's late enough to dream a little. Just don't fall asleep over it. And imagine if we had unions in these airports. Very quickly, the local authorities, the national authorities, and potentially even ICAO would listen to us much more than they do now. And again, multiply this into other operations, such as the dockers, as we have heard earlier today at the 12:30 fringe about that, and other areas as well. So try to let this sink in a little bit, and we'll hear more by my colleagues at the top table about what that means for the international labor movement and ultimately back for you into your national and even regional context. I let this sink in for a moment. I just wait for you to digest for a moment. And then I explain to you why this presentation is yellow, which is not exactly suitable for this hall, nor is it one of the ITF colors. And at this point, I usually refer to one of the raw materials that are part of this supply chain. Imagine a fruit coming off a tree, going onto a truck, going into a port, going onto a ship, coming out of the ship at the other end, and ultimately going to a retailer. We are in a dispute anywhere along that chain, and we can stop this fruit from traveling. Can you imagine the pain we cause to these employers? So tomorrow morning when you go to your hotel breakfast buffet, think of tonight and the presentation when you pick up one of those fruits and think, oh, that's what he was talking about, and think about what this fruit actually traveled from its very beginning to its very end. And you know what I mean and how it all connects. It looks a bit silly, but it's always easier to grapple, you know, this complex supply chain stuff he was talking about at 7 o'clock at night. That's a nice reminder. Whenever you go to a hotel breakfast now in the future, you will think of this presentation and of our fabulous Congress, I hope. But ultimately, and now I'm getting serious one last time, this is what it is all about. Workers on the ground, in dispute, and asking for respect, for dignity, and for having their lives and their work valued as it should be valued, rather than be pushed into precariousness, being ignored, and being denied fundamental workers and human rights. This is what this is about. So the bananas should make you smile, but that picture is what it is all about. I promised I'd make it short. I did it short. Back to our panel, and then, of course, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Ingo. A very concise overview of the work of the Scallop team in London, and of course, more importantly, the work that we're all participating in as affiliates. None of this works because we've got a fancy presentation or a theme document, and we've got too many of them propping up broken chairs and keeping doors open in our offices. This works because you want it to work, because you make it work, and it won't work without your continued support. So a whole host of campaigns there. DHL, the Aviation Aerospace Manufacturing campaign. The Port Hubs campaign, for those of you that attended the lunchtime fringe, of course, a really focused, strategic approach towards ports and logistics parks in conjunction with Industrial as our sister gov. The oil and gas commodities strategy, all, of course, looking at integrated, focused strategies to build power for working people and to make solidarity actions mean a little more than a letter of solidarity or a few people turning up on a picket line. When we talk about activists and organising activities, we talk about legal and capital strategies, and we talk about our media work. So this is challenging everything we do within the ITF, but more importantly, it needs to be challenging everything that you do within your own unions, and certainly within your sections within the ITF. So I'm going to move on now, and I'm going to introduce Sharon Burrow. Sharon probably needs no introduction, really, Sharon. But she's going to look at value chain, and our workers have lost out over the years, the past few decades, in the value chain and decline in union membership, and how we need to be more strategic in the way in which we focus on our organising initiatives. Sharon.
I think I can do this from here. I don't have a presentation, but I want to put a few things in front of you and give you a taste of what's possible with the partnership with ITF and the other global union federations. If you think that global wealth has grown exponentially, it's actually trebled over several decades, that inequality has grown right alongside of it, that we've faced a dramatic global wages slump, that you see incredible downward pressure on social protection. We used to call it, Paddy, quaintly, the social wage. And indeed, that's where your taxes were, in fact, meant to go to support workers and their families. And then, in addition to that, we know that not only is there downward pressure on existing social protection or the social wage, but in fact 75% of our people have no or inadequate social protection. It's 2014. How can that be possible? But in fact, alongside all of that, precarious and informal work is growing everywhere. People are facing a war on their rights, a war on secure jobs. And the 1%, of course, are very happy, but our people and their families are just one pay packet away from disaster if they're lucky enough to have one. So the dominant model of trade that Ingo described for you in detail is actually dependent on supply chains. It's dependent on supply chains. Production, transport and logistics and retail with services all along at each point of the chain. It's an impoverished model. It's actually brought the economy to its knees with the greed of the global value chains that go with the real economy, the supply chain element. And indeed, it's bringing people undone in terms of workers, families and communities for the hopes of security that they have from decent work. If you want to take an example that we're working with right now, low wages, none of us, as I said on Sunday, can ignore the fact that when striking for a minimum wage in Cambodia, our brothers and sisters were shot, they were jailed, and it was sanctioned by their government. It was endorsed by the local employer representatives, who's a really ugly guy called Ken Liu, and I don't mean physically, but certainly he's evil to the core, and we can't walk away from that. You just can't walk away from it. Union Industrial couldn't walk away from Bangladesh, and so the Accord shows us what we can do when unions are serious about working together. We can't walk away from the fact that there's unresolved issues in Indonesia, where again workers were jailed, happily not shot, but jailed for striking for a minimum wage. And of course, where they don't know to date what the new presidential candidate will do in terms of repairing some of the damage to their labour laws and wage fixing systems. And I can go on. I just picked out those countries, but pick any country in Asia, Haiti, other countries in Latin America, go to Africa where 80 to 90% of the work in some countries is informal, where the Chinese model of investment is actually not even allowing you to get to the point of, in many countries, of looking where workers are entitled to labour rights and compliance. So we need to effect change. Ingo's right. We need to change this, and only the union movement will change it. So we've got to have the will and the strategy to do it. For me, if the ITUC's role, it's not to bargain collectively, that's your role. And we have to help you back in those rights. But our role, it seems to me, is to see that there's a floor with our affiliates around the world. There's a floor for workers, minimum wages on which they can live. Not impoverished legal minimum wages, but minimum living wages. Social protection, that's there to pick them up when they're vulnerable. Safety and security at work. Safety, secure jobs, rights and compliance. It's a global scandal. We know it's a global scandal. My challenge to our affiliates is, can we make it a global scandal? Can we make this the global scandal that we've made Qatar? Because if we can do it in one area, we can do it in another. And so, if we can make it a global scandal, can we change the conditions for workers? Well, I want to tell you we're on strong ground. We do global research now because I always believe you have to know what workers want and think, not just think you know what our members want and think. And indeed, when you ask members whether they would pay, global people actually, not just union members, but working people around the world, when you ask them whether they would pay a little more to make sure there were minimum wages for everybody, more than 50% say yes. All respondents, however, 95% agree that all companies, businesses and employers should pay workers a reasonable wage. 95%. 91% of people agree that the international companies should be subject to international rules, labour rights. Sadly, we know that when you ask people if they think that such a promise would work because companies would adhere to this, the majority of people say they don't believe companies will do it. So we need to do something about it. And when 62% of people think governments should actually do more to tame corporate power, and when you have, in fact, 76% of workers saying that unions have an important role in society, we're on strong ground. So, can we actually raise it to a scandal? Can we actually develop the ground war that sees our unions work together to take on governments where there's not sustainable wage fixing mechanisms and companies where they don't pay? Can we actually put other demands on governments where they host the multinational? France has just got legislation that will, if it's passed, require responsibility through the supply chain for fundamental rights. We're talking to the government in the Netherlands about this because their unions got it in their social agreement that they would do the same. So, can we do that? Capital strategies, Ingo actually talked to you about, and we have $30 trillion of workers' capital invested in the global economy. We've got to make sure it works for us and not for the 1%. So the ITF is engaged in groundbreaking work. We think with the emerging Gulf partnerships, these are real, we can effect change, and they have our support 100%. I want to leave you with an example. We are fighting for the workers in Guatemala who are still shot for being trade unionists. We actually have been looking very carefully at the banana chain because Chiquita is one of the biggest companies in the world. Well, just this week, a Brazilian company, Catral, actually made an offer to buy it, and I'm watching the stock prices go like this. But if we've got Brazil in the mix, and you've got the unions in that sector and their supply chain, which means transport and logistics across Brazil and Guatemala in solidarity, I'm pretty excited about this. I'd quite like that sale to go through because I think we can do real work. So, clean up the supply chains. That's the challenge. Change the dominant model of trade. Put a floor of decent work in all countries and build collective bargaining rights. This is real organising, real change. This is workers' power. Go ITF, because you know what? The workers of the world need you.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks very much for that, Sharon. Again, a fantastic presentation outlining the challenges to our movement, the state attacks on 150 years of social progress, whether that be our social solidarity, our healthcare, our jobs, of course, housing, wages, our unions, and this fight back to get decent work, fair standards, a fairer, more just society based on trade union values and collective bargaining. And that's the challenge, not just for the ITF, but all of us individually sitting in this room and across our movement. Okay, without any further ado, I'm going to move on. I'm going to ask our President, needs no introduction yet again, Paddy Crumlin, to address us, been driving home our capital strategy, but doing so much more in terms of the safe rate stuff and his work within his own section in the docks. Paddy.
Thanks, Steve. And there's a lot of crossover between this fringe and this discussion on the fringe at lunchtime about building transport workers' power and the logistics conference. I mean, building workers' power can be, I guess, thematic about how you actually realise the cooperative nature and strategic nature of trade unions and reinvent it in a world that's largely deregulated, and that business, as it probably, or the ideology behind capital is probably, or not probably, certainly at the highest point of strength in the history of human development. And as I said the other day, that's demonstrated by the Oxfam stats and some of the stats that Sharon just gave, that, you know, the wealth of 3.5 billion people, half the people in the world, is equal to the wealth accumulated by 80 or 90 individuals. So they're not going to let that wealth go easily. That's the new type of world that we live in. But they might have the money, but a lot of the money comes from our endeavours, and part of the reason that we're under such savage attack, particularly in transport, is because we're very, very efficient and very effective at delivering industrial outcomes. That's why dock workers have this wonderful history. I mean, that's the reason the ITF was formed in 1888, I think it is. Mac may be in the room. Because there was, you know, workers identified that global trade drives national growth. And if it was true in 1888, it's true in 2014 by the force of the power of X, you know, exponentially. So we got some big challenges now. It got away from us a little bit, and we in a mass movement, but the mass movement in developed countries is a little bit more complacent and institutionalised, and in developing countries there isn't the same crossover and the same resources, and many of the successes of labour in countries like the UK and Australia and the US and Canada and across Europe that the employers and capital aren't going to let replicate in Africa, in areas of Central America, in areas of Asia Pacific, and that they're working very, very hard to stop the building of union power. And that's one of the reasons logistics for all of us is so essential, because as the just-in-time delivery of goods becomes more essential to both profit building and also the expectations of the market and the consumer market, we are the essential ingredients. They can only automate so much of it. There's nothing wrong with automation. We're not Luddites. We've accepted automation, and over generations we've translated it into wonderful working conditions. And in fact, as I said, organisations like the ITF. But what we've got to do now is realise those opportunities within logistics that the new arrangements give us. I mean, we are effectively organised in seafaring. We are effectively organised in the docks. We are getting better organised in intermodal connectors. We can do better. The ITF, one of the ways in our ambition to realise more effective campaigning in logistics, we put a proposal to the executive board that we bring together dock workers and road and rail into a more effective and seamless organising approach. And of course we got ahead of ourselves. You know, people have to want to see how that may be affected, that type of campaigning. But it's still a legitimate vision and a legitimate aspiration to make sure that that piece of cargo can move across all of our ITF affiliates and grow in industrial power and leverage at every point. If we can organise the international shipping industry, why is it so difficult to organise an intermodal transfer zone? Why is it difficult to organise warehousing? Why is it difficult to organise logistics? It's not. And if you want to extend freight into aviation, it's really the freight of human beings, as well as the freight of fresh tuna or abalone or flowers or whatever it may be. Here are these incredibly tight hubs where highly intelligent people are trained, where risk management is essential, where workers talk to each other across a range of duties. Why haven't we been able to affect, the organising of those hubs like we have been able to organise the hubs of ports? Because we haven't applied ourselves in the same way, and because the employers don't want strong, organised airports. Because if you start feeding that back in the logistics chain, and you're starting to deal with those issues of contracting out, dealing with it from a position of safety, dealing with it a position of competency and workers' training, there is tremendous leverage there. What's happened is that we haven't been able to, because they're genuinely international industries, we haven't been able to organise internationally across those sectors in an effective way like we have for seafarers and dock workers. But it was much harder to do it in seafarers and dock workers, and it was done at a time when people used to die and were murdered. No one's killing anybody in aviation. So in logistics, again, I just put to you this opportunity, and if you tie it together with what Sharon said, that we link in with manufacturing, we link in with retail, we link in with the global union federations and their affiliates, and many of those affiliates are also affiliates of the ITF. Where's the difficulty lie? It's only in finding the resources, defining the campaign agenda, revisiting our successes and our failures, building a project plan, and continuing to have a conversation that removes duplicity is a Freudian slip, removes duplication and removes wastage and continues to come back to the point transport workers deserve better. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, thanks very much, Paddy. A real insight there into not just the need to organise, but some of the obscenity of wealth inequality that we face within our society, of course. None of which they're going to give up. They haven't spent all this time and resource trying to rip it away from ordinary working people to give it up. The only way that we're going to rip it back from them is to fight, and to fight in a more strategic, well-organised way if we're going to do that. So that broad analysis, very welcome there from Paddy, and of course outlining the challenges to us to organise and deliver our vision for that better, fairer world. Okay, so I'm going to move on to our last speaker tonight. That's Steve Cotton, our Acting General Secretary until Friday. Steve.
Thanks, Steve. I'm always encouraging the chairs never to let me follow Paddy, but I managed to get the working order wrong tonight. So it's been a bit of a hell of a day today, so I just wanted to try and draw some energy, because when we did our review of how the ITF was structured, we identified that cross-sectorial work was crucial. And I just want to ask my colleagues from Scallop to stand up. Yes, that's you. And the reason I want to ask my colleagues from the regions to stand up. Regional colleagues, Mahendra, Taki, and then our section people. Section people, that's you, Max, certainly last time. I think Celia, you fit into the team too. So, right, so the reason I wanted to put them on their feet is because I wanted to talk about the fact that we've invested into the concept. And you could see that we've brought, Jeremy's taking photos, but I can't forget Jeremy, so let's just turn around and wave at everyone, Jeremy. because we're trying to do our work in a very different way. And that's the contribution from Jeremy and his team on research, and a lot of the Scallop people do tremendous work on research. And it isn't research about academia, it's research about companies, targets, they understand how to make a difference with the targets that we're dealing with. And we're moving very quickly. So I'm not going to take a long time. We've put resource into doing our work in a different way. And part of the agenda of this conference is for you to think about how that work is done in a different way. We need research, we need a strategic plan, we need media strategies, we need to know how to threaten people's reputations, because we want to use everything, every tool possible to have an outcome. Paddy's asked me just to cover briefly one of the areas that we've also expanded in, which is working closely with Jeremy, is capital. We're trying to talk to different unions about their pension funds and other organisations so that we can understand how that works, and that's one of the tools. So for me, the ITF is changing. When you finish this conference, it's crucial that you see that there's new ways of doing things, and there are good, intelligent, motivated people in London, in the regions, throughout the ITF family to do the job. And so that's why I'm going to stop now, because I want to hear from you. What a wonderful team, but now the challenge is to do the next 4 years and clearly deliver real outcomes. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Steve. A real insight into what the ITF national level and international level, indeed, within the organisation are doing to drive this home structurally at ITF level. But it's up to us. We can do this within the sections, and we are going to drive this home within the sections, but it won't work if you're not driving it yourselves in your sections and indeed inside your unions. So look, let's open this up then for some debate. There's a lot to mull over. There's been a lot of issues that have been raised, no doubt, and I'm sure we'll have a great debate. Can we ask colleagues to keep their contributions tight, certainly to a maximum of 3 minutes, 2 if we can get away with it, because I need your cooperation to make sure that as many people that want to get involved in this discussion can do so. But that won't happen if we get people standing up for 5 minutes or 6 minutes, and it's difficult to get the old shepherd's crook out and pull you off stage from here. So with your cooperation, can I see some hands? Hands going up, colleagues that want to participate? I've got Tim, so it's difficult to see from here, but I've got Tim there. I've got Tony, and I've got a colleague at the front here. Is that Dave? Yeah, okay, so I've got 3 and then I'll come back again. Tim? Can we get a mic on? You'll see a countdown on the screen as well. If you can just clock yourself on your time, that would be helpful.
There we go. So the Teamsters is a general union, so that we think in terms of supply chain anyway, because we represent workers not just in transportation, but also in warehouse, which we think of as part of transportation, as well as in manufacturing, particularly in food and beverage. The presentations brought to mind a couple of things for me. We're a union that wants to act in solidarity, and we're not afraid to ask for solidarity when we need it. So when a fight started in Southern California with a group of our members that work in a parts distribution warehouse for BMW, the car manufacturer. The BMW said, "We're closing you down," and our local said, "Why?" And they said, "Well, we've contracted to outsource all of this work." And they said, "Where are you outsourcing to?" "Well, we're going to use the same location. We're just replacing you with other workers." And our local, of course, and our members said, "No, we don't want to do that." We did the research, we asked for solidarity from BMW manufacturing unions around the world, including Unite and our friends in IG Metall in Germany. But knowing the way the ITF works and the strengths of the ITF, we also asked the inspectors at ITF ports that we knew either imported or exported BMW parts or finished cars, and we said, "Would you put up a banner in solidarity with the BMW workers in California. And at 14 different ports around the world, with the full support of the ITF Dockers section and the inspectors and those unions in each of those countries, BMW called the next day, among a lot of other tactics, and said, wait a minute, let's sit down. And those workers still have that job, that's still Teamster represented. BMW still runs it directly. We think in terms of supply chain. One of our big campaigns right now is organizing port drivers who up until deregulation in 1980 were members of the Teamsters, but with deregulation became individual owner-operators. And we're trying to reorganize that sector right now because we know that those drivers that take those containers off the ports to railheads and to warehouses are a key part of the supply chain and need to be represented for us to be able to build the strength that we're talking about with that analysis. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Tim. Tony?
Yeah, thanks very much, Steve. And one of the areas that we've been concentrating on, and I've raised in some previous opportunities during the week, is the retail supply chain and who actually controls that particular supply chain. In the case of Australia, in our research, very early stages, gave us two clear companies, they're called Coles and Woolworths, who control 80% of the grocery market. The top 10 global retailers generate over $1.2 trillion in sales revenue, and they operate across well over 50 countries. For us to address the issue of driver safety and fatigue and decent rates of pay, we have to say who really is the boss. And the reason we have to do that as well is because we have 15 times the national average of people getting killed in any other occupation are killed in the trucking industry because of fatigue, speeding to meet those deadlines, sweating at trucks and sweating at drivers. So we've had to look at the changing of who the client is and about who the real employer is to deal with the safety issues and the dignity issues of both payments and those incentives that are used that result in so many fatalities. By organising the clients is really quite critical and focusing on how they have changed the way we organise in road transport, because traditionally we would be organising these direct hire drivers. What we've done is each branch of the union, and we have a federation style, each of our states have their own branch structure, that each branch of the union has mapped hundreds of firms in a nationally coordinated market client-based campaign to organise many companies simultaneously by targeting the retailer at the distribution hubs. Our targets have become 2 instead of thousands of trucking companies operating in the supply chain. It's only when you figure out who has the power in the supply chain and mount a campaign to hold the correct entity accountable for safety conditions that you're able to effectively organise the changing industry. We've used our power building clauses, our time off the job for delegates in our various agreements to spread the word about organising supply chains and supply chain power. We have aviation delegates, we have bus delegates, we have waste delegates, we have armoured car delegates coming into the retail supply chain and being trained how to support retail supply chain organising, and then going back into their own sectors and starting to apply that experience in their own sectors. This is where we've got cross-education, because the power of the supply chain is the same in every one of our sections we have responsibility for in the TWU. It effectively gives us a capacity to build strength and understanding of where the economic power really lies, what the sort of challenges we have to do both economically, industrially, politically, and in our communities. This has also ensured that we're making sure that we've got the right companies recognising the need for creating a level playing field, that many of these companies that we have would be considered as our direct employers, but they are not our economic employers. Our direct employers are understanding their capacity to build a decent business with decent margins, to have a unionised company, to have a margin that can provide a sustainable business model for themselves. They need to be union and they need to fight the real enemy. That's the clients.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Tony. I've got one more just in this little bit. I'm going to call Dave at the front here, and then I'm going to go to other colleagues. I'm just going to give Paddy in particular an opportunity to come back at this point because I know he needs to get away, and then we'll return, and I've got a number of people already identified. So, Dave?
Yeah, Dave Williams from Unite, and it's my privilege of representing 80,000 transport and logistics workers on our Executive Council, but I'm also chair of what we've got as a shop stewards organisation, National Car Council. And if I can, Chair, just try to be as brief as I can, give an example of what was identified back in 2005, certainly in what was then the Transport and General Workers Union, and of course now, as the project that is here today. And back in those days, the car delivery industry, which has always been a subcontracted industry by all of the major motor manufacturers in the UK, and that's the way it operated. Back in 2005, the Ford Motor Company, not one of the smallest of companies in the world, and with a world reputation of getting what it wanted, decided to deal with the union that involved itself in car delivery in the UK. And in 2005, we've seen for the very first time an intended effort by the motor manufacturers to break the influence of organised labour in car delivery. Car delivery in the UK has minimum standards, minimum rates of pay, which are expected. You needed to have a signed agreement with the union to operate in the industry, to deliver for General Motors or Ford or Nissan or any of the major manufacturers, and it was clearly their intention to deal with that problem. Steve Turner, who at the time was appointed a national officer for our union, got involved with the shop stewards, and it was clear to us at the time that Ford were intending to deal with organised labour. And of course, one of the very things that we did, the shop stewards and the union, the officers, was to map, as has been described, our intention for the road transport and logistics sector as a whole, and exercise our influence. Because being an island, we always knew that Ford, with its intention, would attempt to break the influence that the union exercised across over 45 contractors in the UK. And so came around 2009, because in 2005 it was clear then, and we began to make our decisions about what was necessary, and we mapped, and we organised, and we won, because in 2009, lo and behold, after the dispute with Ford, what did they decide to do but transfer in, contract in, an industry that had been contracted out since 1926. And that's where we are today. So that's the influence we can have. That's the influence that we can organise anywhere around the world. And it's certainly a model that we'd want to join in and make sure that we can exercise for workers anywhere, in any sector, in any industry.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Dave, for that very practical example of winning at work for our people. Okay, I'm going to call the panel in now then, just give people an opportunity to reflect on those three presentations in particular. Paddy?
I just want to make the point, Chair, that it's not class warfare either. And we've got to be careful in the rhetoric of, and I'm probably the best at it in the world, one of them, of saying, well, this is all about building workers' power in an adversarial arrangement, because the practicality, when you analyse the ports of convenience and the FOC campaigns, that there had been just as much done by concrete engagement with certain employers. And when you look at the Maritime Labour Convention, we wouldn't, that's an extraordinary thing in ILO terms, to have an enforceable instrument that defines everything to the size of your bed, to how much food you have, how much time you have off, what your wage is. This is the modern world, and yet we've achieved that in an industry that's beyond the reach of national legislation. We did that because we went to employers and said, you can get into a relationship with us in these tough areas, and that we will support you as long as we can engage and reach an understanding, and we will assist you in removing those parts of the market and give you a competitive advantage. And that's exactly the same in stevedoring. Where they don't want to do that, you then got a capacity to go and organise laterally and horizontal, vertically and horizontally to do something about it. So in all of our configurations, and as you see ship owners in particular, and stevedoring employers, they're the ones that are reaching down the supply chain, and from the other end, it's manufacturing, mining and retailing. So we've got to, this is the mapping of those areas, rewarding the companies that want to engage and penalising the companies that don't. And in doing that, being able to polarise the market. The other thing I'd like to say is the importance of China, and one of the reasons ACFTU were there for the cynics is that they are increasingly going to come under pressure because of both employers in our neck of the woods, ship owners, transport operatives, all of those things, because of the massive amount of trade and transport that's generated, going into their areas and not recognising their right to bargain and their areas. And in vice versa, the big Chinese, very liquid, diversifying sovereign wealth fund, if there's a sovereign wealth fund in the world, it's called the Republic of China, going and investing in Africa, or investing in Australia, or investing, you know, all around the world, buying up the assets, buying up the infrastructure, but not necessarily doing it on the back of labour-friendly areas. And so again, being able to intelligently strategise, building that network, articulating and getting the language right, becomes very, very important. If we lock ourselves, Chair, and I'll finish here, into some sort of stereotypical way of doing things, we're not going to be able to reach that same sort of international flexibility that's open to the employers, many of them that are waging a jihad against us. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Paddy. And just before I have to go, I just want to see if Steve wants to make any parting comments. Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. One thing I didn't mention is that we are talking to the ILO Secretariat. They've put in their work programme supply chains. And there's a lot of encouragement from their Secretariat staff, having seen the success of the Maritime Labour Convention, to get us to be more involved. Now, the time lag to get stuff out of the ILO can be considerable, but we need to be factoring that into our intelligence and our strategies as well. Jeremy is meeting with their researchers, and we are sharing. We're determined not to duplicate information and research. So we're looking how we can factor that in, and that's also part of the consideration of the Executive Board about how do we get what we want out of the ILO on the supply chain. So any assistance, and you know, we're trying to make sure that we coordinate affiliates engagement in the ILO, because we really have to be smart and know what we want and be clear in what we're asking for. So that's the next way forward for us on the ILO activities. But sorry to have to leave. We have another meeting to go to, and thanks for listening to us tonight.
Okay, look, thanks very much. I just want to recognise Paddy and Steve's contribution. I know they need to get away to a very difficult meeting now. So please, colleagues, let's show our appreciation. Okay, thanks very much for that. I've got 4 speakers that have indicated right now, so I just intend to take these 4, and then we'll come back again and see if other colleagues want to contribute. So I've got Singh, I've got the colleague behind Tony Sheldon. Sorry, I don't... Tony, the fellow right behind you?
2 back.
2 back. That's it. 2 back. I've got the colleague on the left there, and I've got Christine from Verdi. So I'm going to take in that order those 4, and then we'll break again, and then we'll come back. Okay, Singh.
First of all, I thank the ITF and ITF leaders who have organized this meeting on a very important subject, to organize the chain supply and logistic workers. And my organization, All India Railwaymen Federation, doing the organizing the workers since its formation, 1924. And what problem we are facing to organize the multinational companies workers in my country, because no multinationals are ready to honor our national labor laws. I have a few examples I can quote before you. that in my country, number of multinationals are working because from the date of welcoming the globalization by my government since 1991, they are coming to our country on the condition, on the assurance given by the Government of India that there will be no interference from the unions in your multinational companies. We are recently facing a very serious problem in Maruti company. Maruti company, there is a fight going on still. We are on the job to give justice to the workers. And there was a big fight. On that fight, our 147 employees are still jailed from last 2 years. And they are not getting bail. On the plea, even judiciaries are also giving against judgment on the plea that if they get the bail, multinational will run away from our country. These are the opinion given by, these are the judgment given by the High Court. And then we approach to the Supreme Court. Now Supreme Court has given the direction to the High Court to start and complete the evidence so that they can get the bail. And that factory, Maruti factory, Manesar, was closed down. And under our persuasion, that factory has again started with the minimum employees appointment of 500 employees. They have started again that factory, and near about 2,000 employees are on the road. Their struggle is going on, and we are also fighting with the multinational as well as our government. And this is our duty to achieve their demand, to give them justice. But another company, DHL, that is the German company. You have, my friend have very nicely presented his presentation before us. We have already organized them. We are representing them. But the authority of the DHL openly threat the employees. If you form the union, then you will be kicked out from the service. You will be transferred from one state to the another state, and you will be placed under suspension. We have formed the union in DHL, and they have suspended number of employees. They have sacked one employee, dismissed from the service, and transfer number of employees from one state to another state. And we are getting regular support from the Asia Pacific ITF office, Comrade Mahendra Sharma and Comrade Sangam. They are assisting us. And before coming to the Sofia, I, along with Sangam, met a German counselor there and narrated the entire story. And he gave us assurance to persuade the DHL authority. But I have raised this issue before the Madam Sharon when she visited my country about the entire unfair labor practice doing by the multinational in my country. We are on the job, we will face them, we are competent enough, we will, this is our country fight, we will fight it out. But I want to mention here that ITF should ensure that all multinationals, those working in my country, the multinational should give us a freedom of association and obey the ILO Convention 87/98 and also implement the agreement where they have given the agreement that freedom of association should be there. But in practical...
You need to sum up, please,
yes,
colleague.
Within a minute, I will sum up. And they are not honoring our labor laws. ITF, I request the ITF authorities to intervene in this matter and have a...
okay, we will. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think you really need to close.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Steve. Okay, colleague here, please, and then we'll cross over the walkway and we'll take the two colleagues to finish up.
Bonsoir à tous, merci. Je suis Mohamed El Ghali, donc de la Fédération CGT des Transports, et je suis un représentant de la CGT DHL France. Je fais partie de la partie DHL Supply Chain, et quand j'entends tous mes collègues et tous mes frères de combat dénoncer les méthodes de DHL, je vois à quel point effectivement DHL est une entreprise qui finalement mérite complètement d'être combattue. Et totalement d'ailleurs. Moi, ce que je voudrais vous dire, c'est qu'en France, DHL emploie une méthode qui est une forme de stratégie pour appliquer le dumping social et essayer de contourner le droit du travail en France, notamment par l'implantation de ses propres salariés chez les donneurs d'ordre. C'est pour ça qu'aujourd'hui, nous, la CGT, mais aussi avec nos collègues des autres syndicats français, nous essayons de combattre cette stratégie qui consiste aujourd'hui à privilégier l'implantation directement chez le client. C'est-à-dire, nous travaillons pour Airbus, nous travaillons pour Air France, nous travaillons pour Samsung, nous travaillons pour toutes les grandes entreprises qui sont connues à travers le monde. Et la manière dont agit DHL, c'est d'implanter directement son propre personnel dans les murs, c'est-à-dire chez le client. Autant vous dire que le salarié DHL aujourd'hui sur la chaîne logistique supply chain n'est DHL que le temps d'un contrat. Comprenez bien que le salarié DHL est entre le marteau et l'enclume. Le marteau, c'est DHL. L'enclume, c'est le client. C'est une stratégie qui vise à intimider les salariés, qui vise à empêcher, qui vise à réduire leur volonté de se syndiquer. Nous parlions d'une baisse de syndicalisation. Cette crainte permanente qu'ont les salariés aujourd'hui DHL de se syndiquer, y compris en France, alors que tout en théorie leur permet de le faire, c'est le fait de perdre leur emploi. D'un côté, DHL recourt très massivement à la précarité, notamment aux boîtes d'intérim, Manpower, Randstad et autres. De l'autre côté, ils implantent directement les salariés chez les clients. Alors ce que nous avons, nous, décidé à la CGT DHL, mais aussi, encore une fois, avec d'autres de nos collègues des autres syndicats, c'est de combattre non seulement DHL à l'intérieur, mais aussi de développer la syndicalisation chez les clients et d'agir y compris contre les boîtes d'intérim pour réduire la précarité. C'est pour ça que nous avons une propre fédération, la fédération CGT de l'intérim, avec justement des représentants chez Manpower, des représentants chez Randstad et autres, où nous essayons de travailler en coopération pour justement réduire cette précarité, réduire la capacité de DHL et des donneurs d'ordre avec qui ils s'entendent contre les droits des salariés. Et c'est pour cette raison-là, et je termine parce que vous voyez, je respecte le temps, c'est pour cette raison-là que je vous dis, vive l'ITF et vive tous ceux qui se battent pour leur dignité.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks very much, comrades.
Ja, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, Thomas Sorg von Verdi. Ich möchte eigentlich die ITF bestärken in diesem Logistikprojekt, weil ich möchte mal mehr von der praktischen Seite euch aufzeigen, wie anfällig diese Industrie mittlerweile auch die produzierende Industrie geworden ist. Heute ist es nicht mehr so, dass in den Lagerhäusern Ware rein, Ware raus, ich sage mal ein klassisches Beispiel, Marlboro-Zigaretten werden von meinem Arbeitgeber verteilt. Das stellt man sich so unter klassischer Logistik vor. Das ist mittlerweile nicht mehr der Fall. Wir sind auch nicht mehr die verlängerte Werkbank, sondern mittlerweile ist es so, wenn ihr manche Logistiklager anschaut, die sehen aus wie ein Produktionsbetrieb. Da gibt es Fließbänder, da hängt man an der kompletten IT-Infrastruktur des Kunden. Und wenn ihr euch das jetzt vorstellt, dann wird deutlich, wie anfällig mittlerweile an jedem Punkt der Supply Chain unsere heutige Wertschöpfungskette und die darin verbundenen Arbeitgeber geworden sind. Ich will es nochmal am Beispiel deutlich machen. Bei BMW in Leipzig arbeiten neben BMW-Beschäftigten über 1000, ich glaube mittlerweile 1500 Mitarbeiter der beiden größten deutschen Logistikunternehmen, Schenker und Kühne-Nagel, Seite an Seite mit BMW-Beschäftigten. Und wenn ihr euch das mal vorstellt, was das für ein Potenzial ist, wenn man hier ein kleines Störfeuer einbringt, dann macht es nochmal deutlich, und das kann ich euch nur wirklich nochmal gratulieren, dass wir diesen Weg beschreiten wollen. Letztes Beispiel, wir hatten bei uns von Verdi in Baden-Württemberg Tarifverhandlungen in diesem Jahr und es war klar, wir müssen Warnstreiks machen. Und wir haben bei uns, waren das komplette Lager 110 Kollegen draußen. Das führte dazu, dass die Autoradioversorgung für Mercedes und Audi an diesem Tag gestockt hat. Das führte dazu, dass BMW Ersatzteilversand für Baden-Württemberg um 50% nicht funktioniert hat. Das führte dazu, dass für einen Dachfensterhersteller die Sendung in die Schweiz nicht transportiert werden konnte. Das zeigt also, wie anfällig wir sind. Und ganz abschließend möchte ich nochmal sagen, wir hatten vor 25 Jahren schon, als die IG Metall um die 35-Stunden-Woche gekämpft hat und die berechtigte Angst hatte, dass ihre Arbeitgeber, die Metallarbeitgeber, die Speditionen und Logistikläger dazu nutzen, Pufferlager anzulegen, haben wir einen Solidaritätspakt geschlossen. Wir waren damals von der ÖTV gar nicht so stark, aber allein die Ankündigung, dass wir diesen Pakt schließen Und dass wir uns nicht hergeben in der Logistikbranche als sozusagen Streikbrecher für die IG Metall hat dazu geführt, dass beide Arbeitgeber erheblich irritiert waren. Von daher kann ich nur sagen, weiter so.
Thanks very much for that, Thomas. Fantastic practical example of building workers' power. Christine?
Ja, ich bin Christine, auch von der Gewerkschaft Verdi und würde ganz gerne auch noch mal erstmal sagen, dass die Idee, die hier entwickelt worden ist, ich bin selber Mitglied im Executive Board, ich für eine grundsätzlich eine absolut gute halte. Wir bestärken auch, ich sage mal, ITF und die Mitgliedsorganisation darin, das zu tun. Ich will aber trotzdem ein ganz klein bisschen Wasser in den Wein gießen, weil ich glaube, dass wir an ganz vielen Stellen, jetzt kann ich nur für meine Gewerkschaft sprechen, noch nicht so weit sind, diese Idee so umzusetzen. Auch ich will hier ein Beispiel geben. Wir haben bei Verdi im letzten Jahr große Streiks an den Flughäfen gehabt, im Sicherheitsgewerbe. Und durch die Liberalisierung, früher war bei uns der Flughafen 1, wir haben einen Tarifvertrag für alle Beschäftigten gehabt, haben wir heute bis zu 40 verschiedene Tarifverträge dort, die teilweise natürlich viel schlechter sind, als was früher da war. Wir haben ungesicherte Beschäftigungsverhältnisse und wir haben wirklich sehr erfolgreich gestreikt. Aber die Kollegen vom Flughafen haben gesagt, warum streiken die? Die anderen, die da jetzt streiken, verhindern, dass ich am Ende des Jahres eine Leistungsprämie bekomme. Und das, glaube ich, da müssen wir dringend miteinander was tun. Wir als Verdi sind noch nicht so weit. Wir haben jetzt eine Flughafenkonferenz gemacht, um Verständnis zu sorgen füreinander. Weil ich glaube, das sind die ersten Schritte, die wir gehen müssen, die einzelnen beschäftigten Gruppen und Unternehmen, die wir in bestimmten Bereichen haben, zusammenzubringen, zu sagen, was sind die Bedingungen, was wollen wir denn? Ich sage mal, das, was wir hier selbstverständlich als Solidarität miteinander hier benennen, das ist in vielen Teilen noch nicht da. Ich fand das toll, Sharon, dass du gesagt hast, wie viele Leute was für den Mindestlohn machen würden. Ob sie das dann praktisch tun würden, da sage ich ganz ehrlich, ich mache ein ganz großes Fragezeichen dran. Auch wir in Deutschland haben heute Beschäftigungsbedingungen. Ihr wisst, wir haben ein gutes Lohnniveau, wo Menschen 2,50 € oder 3 € die Stunde verdienen. Das ist heute so. Und trotzdem, das ist beispielsweise im Taxibereich so, da versuchen wir gerade einen Mindestlohn einzuführen, sagen die gleichen, die sagen, Mindestlohn ist gut, sagen, ich will aber nicht mehr fürs Taxi bezahlen. Das heißt, ich werbe heute dafür, wirklich Hausaufgaben zu machen. Wir als Gewerkschaft müssen, ich bin ja fast fertig auch, müssen unbedingt identifizieren, in welchen Bereichen sind welche Unternehmen ansässig. Was brauchen wir, um erfolgreich zu sein? Das gilt für DHL, das gilt aber auch für andere Bereiche, wie zum Beispiel Amazon. Amazon ist auch bei Verdi ist eine größere Gewerkschaft, die eben auch den Handel hat, ist auch bei Amazon stark. Und Amazon kriegen wir in Deutschland trotz monatelangen Streiks in den unterschiedlichen Lägern nicht geknackt. Wir kriegen es nicht hin. Wir brauchen auch die DHL, wir brauchen die Transportunternehmen und es reicht nicht, sie in Deutschland zu haben, sondern wir brauchen sie auch in den anderen Ländern, weil Amazon, wenn wir zu hart sind, ein Kollege hat ja ein Beispiel gemacht, machen die das Lager zu. Und dann gehen sie in ein anderes Land und dann müssen wir laufen immer hinterher. Das heißt, werben will ich heute wirklich mal, grundsätzliche Strategie ist richtig, aber das muss hinterlegt sein mit konkreten Planungen. Dankeschön.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Christina. Can I ask if any of the panel members want to make a comment at this point? And then I've got 3 colleagues that have already identified to come in. And at that point, we'll probably finish up with some closing comments from the panel to keep ourselves on schedule. So, Ingo?
Yeah, maybe I'll do a first quick one before we wrap up a little bit later. Am I on the 3 minutes? Or?
You're on 2 minutes, Ingo.
Yeah, actually, I already had 20, yes. I'm actually quite glad. When we planned for this evening, we did not know what to expect. Would we have 5 people because nobody really cares and it's sunshine outside? Or will we have the room full of skeptics who don't really think this is important? And this is a tremendous surprise, and I am very happy that we put this together. And it won't be the last event of its kind, I can tell you that already. I will do a few things a little later maybe, because it's more like a wrap-up thing, but the 2 concrete examples you've heard of, Amazon and DHL, I should maybe mention and be very clear about, because some people have seen me in one of the cafes or the bars around the corner today during the day. I did actually work there, you will be surprised to hear, because DHL, as we sit here, and as we discussed the OECD outcomes yesterday and the day before, they fire people in India and they threaten a union in Chile. So what our colleague from France said is not the end of a nice OECD process, which we discussed 2 days ago, but it is a continued struggle, and it is great to hear commitment like this, because this is the only way forward. They will understand that they are on a watch, they do understand that they are on a watch, and they are still playing around, so we will make it a little bit clearer for them to understand that they are on a watch. And I'm very glad that we are doing this literally like this, together with our friends from UNI. So you have been at the workshop, the DHL workshop, and we'll roll it out from there in both London and the regional offices. Amazon, Christina and I have talked over the last days, and this is another project which UNI and ITF together work on, among others, with the Verdi Union from Germany. But Tim was at a meeting the other day where we put unions together from the Amazon network as a beginning to eventually push it further and further, and ultimately, ideally, we'll see how long that takes and where we get with this, go to a strength of a union network and a powerful union network as we have it in DHL. Both of them, DHL as well as Amazon, and others of that kind, because just because you're not named doesn't mean that you're not on our list. Be very clear, you are on our list, and whenever you heard someone in France or you heard someone anywhere else, we'll get you, and whether there is an OECD agreement or not.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Inga. Sharon, do you want to say anything now, or are you happy to close up at the end? Okay, fine. Thanks for that. I've got a colleague here. I'm going to call a colleague here. And I've got 2 other colleagues. Oh, sorry, I've got 3 other colleagues, and then we're going to close. Okay.
Hello, I'm Johan of the Belgium Trade Union, ACV Transcom. Today we can listen to the story of the supply chain and the link of the union. In November 2013, I was in London for the startup meeting of the Scallop team with Ingo and his team. There was a lecture of the new economic trends about global delivery and supply chain and the link of the union. We at ACV Transcom are aware of the importance of the supply chain story and the opportunities this brings us. In our union, we can immediately link the theory to the practice. Today, there are already 4 major supply chain stories. I'm talking to the groups TNT, UPS, DHL, and FedEx. But after the startup meeting in November, we started with ACV Transcom with a new file, the file at Wim Bosman and Mainframe Group. What I want to say is, tomorrow in the afternoon, we have a French. We will bring you a presentation of the story of Transport Manhout. It's a small Belgium company, and his evolution through takeovers by first Wim Bosman and later to the Mainframe Group, a New Zealand multinational. We will also make the link between Europe and Africa, all through the supply chain story by placing focus at Daikin. It's one of the biggest Wim Bosman customers. It's, I think, a very interesting file, but if you want to hear more, everybody is welcome tomorrow at our friends. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, thanks very much. Sangan?
Thank you, Comrade Chair. Just wanted to share that this fringe event today is at a very opportune time, and we have the top leadership of our railway unions and the port unions and the aviation unions attending this event. And the reason is that in November later this year, we are going to have a logistics and supply chain seminar in India. And the idea is that for the first time probably we'll be inviting our railway unions, our port unions, our aviation unions and the road transport unions, and to precisely have a discussion on this and what is the big picture scenario in India. And the big picture scenario in India is very, very interesting. We have a 3,000 kilometer dedicated freight corridor, rail freight corridor being built in India in the next 2 or 3 or 4 years. And that offers a big challenge for our railway unions. They have been organizing the traditional passenger and freight models, but this is the new model. Along these dedicated freight corridors, there are special economic zones going to be built. It's a new kind of an organizing challenge for our railway unions. There are going to be more of the dry ports in the northern part of India, which is away from the sea. A lot of dry ports coming up where these dedicated trains, container trains will be going into. And those are going to be big organizing challenges because they'll be serving the big markets of the North India. Similarly, for our port unions, also the emergence of special economic zones, the inland container depots, the container freight stations coming up around the global network terminals. So global network terminals were the first organizing targets, but now it's these big economic zones developing around the global network terminals which are going to be the big challenges for our port unions. We have big MROs coming up in the aviation sector, dedicated MROs, and the aviation unions have to think in terms of organizing these MROs. So in November, we are going to have this big logistics and supply chain seminar, and we are also going to invite selected unions from the other parts of South and Southeast Asia, which may be having supply chain links with some of these corridors and hubs. So I think this has been a good introduction to that, and I'm sure, and we're not just going to leave at that. You know, when we have this seminar in November, it's the leadership which is going to come. But once the leadership is on board, then we'll be asking the leadership to give us young organizers who could be then trained into organizing into these new areas of challenge. So just wanted to share this with you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Angwin. Raj?
Thanks, Chair. My union, which is affiliated to the All India Railwaymen Federation, decided to organize the unorganized, which come into the periphery of the railway system. So we identify workers working in the container corporation, auto and taxi drivers coming to the railway station, and the contract workers who are doing the outsourced jobs of the railways. The Container Corporation came into existence in 1988, which is a subsidiary of the Ministry of Railways. There, we have now registered a union. There are about 700 local employees and more than 1,000 employees who are migrant workers coming from the north and northeast part of the country. Once we started organizing these people, there was a lot of resistance both from the employers and also from the contractors. But because of the strong presence of the railway union, we were able to convince the workers that if you join the union, you will not be victimized. That gave them the confidence, and today I can say out of the 600 local workers, we have got 300 workers within our organization, and most of them are operators, mechanics who are in the strategic position. Of the migrant workers of 1,000 people, I have organized about 700 people, and with the support of all these workers, we broke the link, we broke the supply chain at least 4 times to insist on basic rights. So thereby we have signed 2 collective bargaining agreements ensuring minimum wages, which was not there before we formed the union. We have ensured accidental insurance, we have ensured proper working conditions, and we have ensured that they are paid rest. So I am confident, and within the southern region, there are 8 more inland container depots in which we will definitely organize within the next 2 years, and I hope and confident that we will organize all these workers by 2016. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for that, Raj. And a colleague here. Thanks.
Hola, buenas tardes a todas y a todos. Soy Mario Martín, de Comisiones Obreras. Soy el responsable del sector de carretera, de transporte de carretera, porta de carretera del sindicato. Y aparte soy trabajador de DHL, que he participado en la jornada que hicimos el otro día. Y simplemente desde nuestro conocimiento queríamos aportar un par de reflexiones. La primera, el concepto de logística es complicado de desarrollar en una única definición. Cada país, cada cultura, cada legislación, yo creo que lo marca y lo fija de una manera. En España la tenemos regulada en convenios colectivos, la tenemos regulada en ley, y aún así pues tenemos nuestras dificultades cuando entra en liza los marcos laborales. Es una reflexión hacia el organigrama o los planes de trabajo que los felicito, y que creo que esto es un inicio de un camino muy largo y que tenemos que seguir desarrollando. ¿Por qué? Porque cuando se haga una medida de solidaridad, nosotros hemos hecho, sobre todo sectorialmente, muchas, y cuando es a nivel de empresa, pues realmente cobra más fuerza, y cuando nos han solicitado desde otros países hemos colaborado, sobre todo a niveles de multinacionales y de grandes empresas. Aquí entra en controversia o entra en conflicto la problemática de lo que es el mercado, la crisis y el aprovechamiento del conflicto de una empresa por otras empresas. Queríamos dejar esa reflexión porque los trabajadores no solamente temen por sus puestos de trabajo, sino que son los empleadores o las empresas, los clientes, los que fijan y lo que marcan. Empresas que habéis nombrado como Carrefour, Samsung, compañeros de Francia, etcétera. En España acabamos de tener una regulación de Samsung porque se centraliza. Las multinacionales sufrimos muchas centralizaciones. En la India, que vamos a participar también en el seminario con los compañeros, creo que es muy importante. Y entonces ese tipo de reflexión creo que es importante lo tengamos en cuenta cuando se vaya a hacer una acción y qué tipo de colaboración, sobre todo por el recorrido o el aprovechamiento que pueda tener hacia terceros. Y nada más, felicitaros de nuevo y un saludo.
Well, thank you very much, comrade. Echoing some of the comments earlier made by Christina from Verdi as well about keeping our feet on the floor and making sure all of our people are with us when we move forward. Okay, I'm going to ask then Sharon to make a few closing remarks, and then Ingo, and then we'll close tonight's Fringe. Sharon.
Thank you, and thank you for the courage, because the last brother was right. This is in fact the beginning of a long journey. It is a picture of our future if we're to have a solid future and build back the power of workers that we need to get the fair share of the global economy that's gone missing. I want to just pick up on 2 or 3 of the issues. Mapping opportunities, I thought, fantastic. The Amazon, what's next door. We need to do much more of that, and we need to actually think about who works around us. And I think you saw some of that today in the lunchtime discussion, described really well by our chair and indeed by Noel. In terms of implementation, so you must map the opportunities, because if you don't do that, then we don't even know where to begin. The second thing is implementation. Christine's right. The worst thing you can do is go off and fire at a strategy without having, in fact, a readiness from long and detailed preparation. So you've got to know who's in the mix, exactly as our brother said, what are the impacts across the workforce, whether it's local or whether it's part of the supply chain. But if you make the decision, then you need a plan. You need to know what the leverage is, and it can't be just one piece of leverage. You have to have a leverage, what we call a leverage ladder, which means when the first one has a bit of an impact, but you know, it dies after a week or two, the boss gets over it, bad results in the labour and the stock market, but it bounces back. What's your next strategy? How do you keep upping the ante? And in order to do that, you don't only need to be prepared, you need to be tough, sometimes pretty dirty, but you actually need to build the engagement with the workers and prepare them for what the tactics will be, and the relationships that Christine talked about. Frankly, it leads me to the point that I would want to make, is that a strike, strike's something we all use. It's effective in some situations. It can be actually quite destabilising in others. It's part of our DNA. But while strikes are a strong tactic, they're not necessarily sustainable in all cases. They won't necessarily be the tool, although they may be part of the toolkit, but they won't be the tool that drives the success in the end. So you've got to say, what's the toolkit, what are we going to use, and where is it most effective? And you've got to stay the distance. The journey isn't just to start and think about it and get it ready and have a go and fail and then say, well, we tried. It's staying the distance, it's evaluating, it's coming back, it's having those fresh, the energy for fresh approaches. So the challenge is, though, if we don't build the collective power to change the current environment, then we're not going to actually see any of our ambitions raised. We are out of time. We are actually out of time. We're doing good work, but it's not strategic and it's not deep and it's not broad enough in too many cases. There are too many people unorganised. It's that simple. But Paddy was right. We'll go after the bastard employers, but if you change them, or if there are good ones to start with, they become your strategic partners and you leverage them against the bad elements of the market or the community or whatever your framework is. So we've got to undermine the bad employers, but where we can, we've got to turn them to strategic or bargaining partners. And the thought I'd leave you with is, it's not rocket science, it's just doing the work in a collective sense and not allowing ourselves to be siloed, not allowing workers to be siloed by self-interest or strategic views about your own power or whatever it is. You must actually have workers behind you. So organising is critical. And when you think about how to describe this, the way I say to workers, and my brother from India said it, the employers, the dominant model of employment, particularly through supply chains, but everywhere, it's marginalising workers. Well, we now need to marginalise the corporations that employ those tactics. It's that simple.
Thanks very much for that, Sharon. And Inga.
Yes, thank you, Stephen, and thank you very much, Sharon. As always, inspiring. I like the idea of the leverage ladder. The House of Labour has been reined into. It's time to fix the roof, and for that we will need a strong ladder, and we will build it, and we will rebuild it. I don't have much to say, really. I'm glad that there's a mood in the room that we are doing the right thing and that the Congress theme document will be rolled out, and this is part of it. Personally, I'm quite happy about this as well, because otherwise my team in London would be irrelevant and we could just all go home. So I'm quite happy about that one as well. Problems, yes, but evidence is in the room. In this room, we have evidence that it does work. It has worked in Britain, it has worked in the US, it will work in India, it has worked in Australia. We will get it done. Very simple and very straightforward. It needs you, it needs us, it needs brothers and sisters outside the ITF, and then it will happen. Wherever they will hide their ships to avoid good regulation, wherever they want to escape to work around existing driver's hours and regulation, wherever they fly their planes, we are already at the other end to catch them and to catch the jobs that they are trying to get rid of. They have armies of lawyers to fight us. They have millions of dollars to fight us. We don't have either of those two. That's fine. They do not have one thing, one very important thing. Without that, we will eventually make it and they will eventually fail. They do not have the cause of working men and women, young and old. This is what makes us different. That is what makes the labor movement different from the corporate movement, and this is why we will ultimately implement this and build our own ladder of leverage and fix this roof in the House of Labour.
Right, okay. Well, thanks very much, Ingo, for that rousing close. I don't think I need to add anything to that. I do want to thank our panel, Paddy and Steve, having left us, of course, but Sharon and Ingo, of course. But most importantly, I want to thank you, not just for being here, but for your fantastic contributions, sharing your experiences with us. We've had a great range of, and very broad range of contributions this evening. And it enlightens us, it inspires us, and it gives us an opportunity to move ourselves forward as an organisation as well. So look, we've got huge challenges. We've always faced huge challenges. The history of social progress and workers' struggle is one of class struggle. Nobody's ever given us anything, as we continue to say. The reality is we've had to fight for it every step of the way. And that's what we're going to continue to do. And with our solidarity and our commitment to win that fight, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that will stand in our way. So solidarity, comrades, thanks for your presence this evening. There is a fishing fringe meeting that's going on right now. If people want to join that particular fringe meeting, feel welcome. And if you leave from the left stage, please, left stage, can you hand your headsets in? Just been given a reminder that people need to hand in their headsets. Thank you very much, colleagues. Fringe closed.